Yeah, I'm here with Jonathan after doing blood labs for the second time because I had, it's good to do this quarterly, if not sooner, these blood labs, especially when you're trying to make change, when you change the diet. And I've, taken on this bioenergetic because I did Jonathan's course here back in April where we did original blood labs and got a baseline of where I was at. And then says, oh, and Jonathan, so I did a session with him to where, all right, these are things that we need to change more in your macro, right? From a bioenergetic platform, it's like, it's not all about fats for fuel anymore. It's about getting more carbs in the diet and maybe a little less fat and the appropriate amount of protein for one's weight. And so it gave us a baseline from which now here 6 months later already, April now to October, which I've made some shifts, eating more liver, eating less fat, more carbs, a lot more fruit juice, a lot more fruit, right, in the summertime. And let's see what happens here. One of the main things we didn't test for back in April, for some reason it got left off the labs, was testosterone. And of course, for us guys, that's an all important one. It's a big longevity hack. It's a good hack for just being strong, sleeping well in the bedroom, all these things that make us men. We want our testosterone to be up there, where it needs to be. So it's really the first time that I have a real baseline in probably the better part of 8 years on where my testosterone is. So let's go through this, Jonathan. On
Yeah.
and can you
Tell
hear?
me, yeah, I can hear fine. And so a few more, I just want to get a couple more details from you about what you've changed since the
Yeah.
last blood work. So I heard some of the foods that you incorporated. Did you do any chronometer recording?
Because calcium was a concern that we were robbing from the bones and teeth. And so that was a biggie. Liver was the big shift. Downplaying no more butter and, ghee as much, since I was getting that from red meat. So a shift out of chicken to pretty much all red meats, healthy grass fed meats. And so that almost daily, well, or that or liver. But no chronometer time. Yeah.
Do you do you have any feeling difference from making these changes, or is this you kind of feel is it unremarkable?
Um, I sense
So an increase in body fat percentage.
I don't know about body fat. Maybe muscle mass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's two things that I want to walk through. One is your lab work and do an interpretation of that in comparison to last time. But the other thing I want to do is run. Um, it's going to be a little limited because you haven't been tracking a chronometer, but hopefully it will show you, it'll inspire you to actually get on this. And the people around you can help inspire you to get on this because um, I think your fundamental issue, and so this is not like a
Right.
major
Not a
issue,
criticism, right?
right?
It's too less
But
of food. Too not enough food.
right, you're under eating
Yeah.
relative to your relative to your daily needs.
Yeah.
That's
I
my
don't
take.
yeah, I don't, and that's where the chronometer will tell us. So this is good because I would tend to disagree, but we don't know, right? If we don't know, I feel satiated, full, eating like all the time, have some,
Well, if you right, so but you won't know from feeling because if your metabolism is depressed from predominantly fatty acid oxidation, then you won't have hunger.
gotcha.
And there's evidence in your blood work. So why don't we start there? I'll do a screen
Yeah,
share.
fair enough.
Um, and so we'll start at the top here with your CBC. You know, your WBCs and your RBCs look fine. I liked that your WCs tracked up a little bit
So
because
white
that
blood
seemed,
cells, right? We'll go for the layman here. Are my white blood cells? We're looking at our, blood cell, differential platelet. What does NLR stand for?
it's the type of testing they used.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Um, and so, you were a little depressed in the white blood cell area and just overall, like I think we saw some depression in the globulins as well, in your liver globulins. And that's part of the liver globulins are antibodies. And so there seemed
Mm-hmm.
to be a little bit of an immune depression happening.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but in all of your other sort of your hemoglobin is in the perfect spot. Like I wouldn't do any phlebotomy or any blood donation.
Right.
Um, and some of the other red and white blood cell markers they're fine. Um,
Great.
so moving into the more metabolic stuff, your CMP is the main thing we're looking there is at your fasting glucose. And so were you 12 hours fasted at this time?
Yep.
Okay. Um, and were you hungry? Did you get growling stomach or hungry
No.
whenever you got the blood draw? Okay. So
Yep.
your glucose is still within the ideal range. For me, that range is like 75 to 90
Mm-hmm. And I'm at
as an
88.
ideal range. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's up a little bit from last time,
We're
but
not we're not looking at on the screen. We're not. I can't see these lab tests. Are you
oh,
looking
yeah.
at lab tests?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Sorry, let me reshare this and see if it. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep. There we go.
Okay. All right. So just to start over again. So here's your white blood cells, 3.9 up to 4.2. Your RBCs they're about the same. Hemoglobin. This basically the three that I look at. And if
Mm-hmm.
they're off, then I start diving deeper into the other, sub markers regarding red blood cells or white blood cells. So everything is fine in this regard. And then here's your fasting glucose from 80 to 88, still in the perfect zone. Your electrolytes are looking fine. Now we're down here and I'm looking at your alkaline phosphatase, AST and ALT. These are three major liver enzymes. Give us an indication of sort of like liver burden.
Mm-hmm.
It's generic. We don't know what causes these to go up and down, but you want it to be, an ideal would be less than 20.
Oh wow.
Um, and for their range, it's up, it's less than 40. So you're
Mm-hmm.
still within the sort of normal context, but a little above optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not worrisome. It's more curiosity, like what is causing that to elevate.
Right.
And because they're generic, we don't really know, but it's a bookmark I usually put in the back of my mind and look
Mm-hmm.
for other things that might reveal that. Your lipid panel is pretty interesting. It rose, total cholesterol rose 18 points. And
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that that is because of the increase in goat milk
Yep.
and the increase in liver. Um, and so your fat's becoming more saturated as a result.
Mm-hmm.
You took the chicken fat out, and you took out some other
Added
potential
beef
sources.
fat, a lot more beef fat going in, right?
And so this is a normal kind of measured phenomenon that when your diet becomes predominantly saturated, your liver is going to increase the production of cholesterol to make the cell membranes more malleable.
Okay.
And so saturated fat, the main purpose of it in your body is to make up your cell membranes.
Yeah.
and and that's just fat in general. And
Yep.
when they're more saturated, the saturation sort of makes these cell membranes really stable, which is what we want, but it can also make them a little rigid. So as a compensatory mechanism, your liver is going to produce more cholesterol so that those cell membranes have some flexibility and pliability to them, so they're stable and they're flexible. That's sort
Yeah.
of the ideal state.
So it's a good thing, even though it appears on the high end, it's really a healthy high end to have this given what I'm eating, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well, and it's a normal response to what you're
Mhm.
eating. It doesn't, what we know about cholesterol now
Yeah,
is so far removed from arterial plaque formation that
yeah.
it's more of a metabolic marker than it is a coronary marker. And so it's normal. Like they did kind of side by side studies of these two islands in the South Pacific, and one island was using coconut oil for everything, and the other island was using almost no saturated fat. But every other aspect of their diet was the same. And
Okay.
the people on the one island using the coconut oil predominantly had 20 to 40 points higher cholesterol simply by having this elevated saturated fat. The other thing is that as you age, you want your cholesterol to increase. It's it's protective. And so at your age, this is really quite good. I mean, you could even afford to be 20 points higher. And so as you get into your 60s and your 70s, what they found is the healthiest range from sort of mortality studies is in the 240 range.
Okay.
So
As I
so that's not
continue to
something to
eat
worry
more
about.
goat milk and stay with the saturated fats, we may continue to see that increase.
I
Is
think
that
so. Yeah.
okay?
And really the only sort of marker that is really the thing that you want to be concerned with are your triglycerides. I mean, this is basically fat.
Mhm.
Um, and it can be produced in a few different ways, but a lot of times you'll see it whenever the amount of carbs and fat are really high in the diet. So if
Mm.
you were like something like 45% fat, 45% sugar, and the difference being protein, you would see like triglyceride problems. But your triglycerides are perfect. You want them under 100 as an
Mhm.
ideal.
It
So not
The
anything to
fact
worry
that they
about.
went up considerably, almost 20 points,
Yeah.
almost 30%, 33% increase, but that's
hmm
not a concern. I mean, because they're still within range. And again, that's a function of having these different fats in my body, more
Um,
saturated.
it can be. It can also be a function of it can be also a function of how much or how little carbohydrate you have coming into your diet. And so again, we're like got to speculate here because you didn't do a baseline in chronometer for what your macros are. So
Okay.
that's why I always have these two things side by side.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at blood work and I'm looking at what you're eating and what your macro intake is of these foods and seeing the relationship there. And so you know what you ate, but we don't know the amounts.
Right.
Um, and so also this increase in LDL cholesterol, not a concern. It's not high from my vantage.
Hmm.
Um, and LDL is the lipoprotein that shuttles the cholesterol into the cell to make pregnenolone, which is the first hormone. the first
Mm,
steroid hormone, that
mm,
then goes on to make all the other steroid hormones. So you don't want LDL to be low, and you don't
right.
want it to be really high either, because this is where your steroid hormones are ultimately coming from.
Great.
And so the next one down is testosterone. Um, yeah, it's not bad. I would consider you probably would have symptoms or more symptoms if you were under 500, 400.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
in an ideal range for, I would say, somebody over 40 is like over 800.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
nowadays, I mean, even kids in their 20s, guys in their 20s have got like below 500. So,
Right. Right.
um, for doing all the things that we've already talked about, they're doing those things wrong. They're just unaware. But this is something like, I know, we have a mutual friend who is 61, and his total testosterone is 950.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
so, and he's not really
Doing anything.
exercising.
Right.
Yeah, and he's probably at 25% body fat. And so, um, there's sort of an upper threshold and a lower threshold of body fat where
Hmm.
that will negatively affect testosterone. And so the lower threshold is like you're kind of in that area. You
Yeah.
don't really want your body
Body fat.
fat percentage to be below 10% as a man,
Right.
or it will start lowering your testosterone. And
Yeah.
we'll get into that a little bit later. But
Hmm.
and then that upper percentage is like over 25, really.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a guy on Twitter or X that I follow, and he only does testosterone optimization. That's his whole business is around this and doing it naturally.
Hmm.
And he has said that so he's like his maximum testosterone that he's gotten since he's been trying to work on it is 1250 total.
Wow.
And he said that he was at 20% body fat when it happened, and
Oh.
he's been at 6% before, and he's been at 25% before. And
Uh-huh.
so, and that lined up. So there is, 20% is not what we would think of as like a fit looking person, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it could go up 100, 150 points.
Yeah.
And we'll see a little bit later why I think that's happening. Your SHBG is a little higher than ideal. Like, we would probably want it to be like 40, 45. So
Hmm.
there's room for movement there. And a couple of things that would lower that is, basically carb intake and insulin regulate, have a big impact on sex hormone binding globulin. So does thyroid, and
Hmm.
so does iron status. So we can rule out iron status because it's not high,
Hmm.
and I do think it has more to do with carbohydrates and insulin, because I think, again, I think you're under eating, and so
Yeah.
that would impact it. And what I usually order is not calculated but direct free testosterone. This is a little less accurate, but
Oh.
based on what we're seeing for total and what we're seeing for SHBG, your free testosterone direct would probably be lower than ideal, because those other two markers impact free testosterone, and they're a little bit high. So that would lower it. But your DHT, which is the most androgenic hormone, is good at 67. So that's quite good. And to give you a reference point, Paul Saladino, who is, formerly known as the Carnivore MD, who's
Right.
now doing the animal-based diet, very popular. He's eaten, I don't know, quarter pound or half a pound of liver a day and heart, and he's like organ meats and carbs.
Hmm.
Um, his DHT is like around 43.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Is it higher better necessarily?
well, you won't ever see it too high.
Hmm.
So let's put it
Oh,
that way.
okay.
But you will see it too low
Okay.
if you've got androgen suppression for some reason.
Okay.
And DHT is downstream of testosterone. So there's an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase that converts your testosterone into DHT, and DHT is um, is really responsible for, like, the deeper voice and the body hair and like this sort of masculine characteristics that we think of.
Yep.
Um, and probably also more of an association with dopamine as well, confidence, social, um, like social confidence and dominance and that kind of thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, as far as DHT is concerned, you're looking good. And so here we are looking at PHT, which stands for parathyroid. Previously, you were 37, now you're 31. You went down. That's good. We want it to be below 30. And it's interesting because when I was over we have another mutual friend who runs a clinic, and I was there a couple weeks ago for some NAD, and the guy sitting next to me had um, totally dysregulated calcium, had been in the hospital for like 3 months. I know another person in Sedona that had a similar issue where they were hospitalized with like mystery illness, and at the end of the day they tracked it back to elevated parathyroid. And so what happens when your serum calcium levels drop too low, it
Mm-hmm.
signals the parathyroid to increase production of parathyroid hormone. And there's these four little glands on the back of your thyroid gland, and so that's its location is why they call it parathyroid, is right here. And so what it does is when this
Wait,
gets
where
released,
is it? Show me again where it is in the.
yeah, it's like on the back side of the thyroid,
Okay.
here,
Okay.
right in
And
this
what's the
area.
significance of this parathyroid?
If you don't have enough dietary calcium, or you have too much dietary phosphorus.
Uh,
So, for example, you're not eating enough dairy, and you're overeating beans, legumes, and meat, then your parathyroid will get activated to try to balance calcium and phosphorus in your system. And what it's going to do is it's going to basically pull calcium from your bones and your teeth to
mm-hmm.
supply the necessary, to make sufficiency occur in the blood.
Okay.
And that's why it gets elevated. And so that was why my recommendation back in, April, was for you to increase dairy if
Mm-hmm.
you could tolerate it, and you chose goat milk. So
Mm-hmm.
that had an impact, and I think you could double it.
Yeah, meaning I could double my goat milk, not this
Yeah.
PTH level. Okay.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that would decrease your PTH level. Now,
Yeah.
parathyroid is anti-metabolic. So what happens is, as a result of kicking this process in, not are you only losing bone density, but
Yeah.
you're also, now you got all this free floating calcium, which can really easily start to go inside the cell and cause metabolic problems in the cell. It can
Mhm.
also go into your arterial, epithelium, and so that's where you would see calcium build up in the arteries. That would lead. That would sort of be the um, the
Result. Yeah.
third thing that might happen in
Mm-hmm.
arterial plaque buildup,
Yeah.
and that's why someone would go get a CT scan and look at.
Mm-hmm.
They would look at that.
Yeah.
And so if you can't or don't want to increase your
Goat milk.
your goat milk, then supplementing some form of calcium.
Mm-hmm.
It could, people in the bioenergetic community, they like eggshell calcium, like finely ground eggshell calcium, or they coral calcium, or some people are now taking pearl calcium.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you could tolerate it, just go 16 ounces of goat milk, one in the AM, one in the evening, and
Yeah.
instead of 8. And you would probably drop it another 6, and now you'd be in our ideal area that we want to be in.
Okay. And again, probably 2% more ideal than whole goat milk because I'm probably got plenty of fat in my system at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, and it's easier on my system too. I like goat milk because it doesn't take much to digest. You're getting the protein, without having to work to digest it. So Yeah, it's ideal, and it's got a lot of potassium, and I don't think we get enough. We tend not to get enough potassium in our diet, and so yeah, a lot of benefits to that goat milk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's pregnenolone. That's the first steroid hormone I was talking about. So basically, you've got um, you've got cholesterol moving into the cell, and then it's going to get shuttled again into the mitochondria. And the process of shuttling is more or less regulated by thyroid hormone, and then it goes through the mitochondria of the gonads or the brain or another endocrine gland to make pregnenolone. And then from there, pregnenolone is then converted into, can either be converted into progesterone or DHEA or cortisol or estrogen or testosterone and eventually DHT. So all of these hormones are sex steroid hormones. Pregnenolone is the first one.
Okay.
Yours is low. And so an ideal range is like 125 to 200.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
Now, it's the good news here is that because your testosterone is at 650 roughly, your
Mm-hmm.
DHT is at 67,
Mm-hmm.
your estradiol is even elevated, your cortisol is elevated as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're getting enough to make all those hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But pregnenolone on its own does have specific effects that are beneficial, especially for cognition,
Oh,
memory,
wow.
and neuronal health.
Yeah.
So this would be something I'd recommend in the short term taking
Supplement.
as a supplement.
Yeah. Yeah. From Health Natura, huh?
I
If they,
I like, yeah, they have it. It comes in a powder,
yeah.
and what you want to do is basically, you know, uh, you can you want to hold on one second. Um, it comes with like a mini scooper, and they have some dosing guidelines on there. But what's important is that when you take this powder, you want to mix it with a little bit of ghee or a little bit of butter because you want to mix it with a long chain fat. It could also be coconut oil,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would just take it orally. Just take it as ingest it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do 30 milligrams, 50 milligrams, but the bottle has some dosing suggestions. Mercola has some dosing suggestions as well,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that he takes on the daily.
Yeah, yeah. I think if Health Natura doesn't have it because they were out when we looked last time. I believe Christina found another supplier, and maybe it was even Mercola. So I'll look. Yep. But okay, I'll go get some of that.
If
Easy.
it's not already mixed in a long chain fat, make sure that you do that.
Okay.
Okay. So that's I think a good sort of secondary intervention here. Um, your homocysteine went down. That's curious to me, and I bet my guess there is that. And by the way, this is an inflammatory amino acid. It's
Mm-hmm.
especially inflammatory for the arterial epithelial cells. So we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to mess with that. Um, you ideally want it to be like kind of under 7.5. So it's still a little bit elevated, but my suspicion is that the increase in liver that you've been eating, which would
Mm-hmm.
have elevated your B vitamin intake, your folate,
Mm-hmm.
and your B12 and your B6,
Mm-hmm.
that's what lowered the homocysteine.
Oh, okay. That's great.
And and so that's usually the first thing that we try to do if someone has elevated homocysteine is like get them some of these methylated B vitamins, which
Yeah.
you are essentially getting by eating liver. So you could probably take a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um,
So maybe supplement with a B vitamin is a potential here just to see what happens because I don't think I can stand more liver. I mean, it's
okay, yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of different companies that are reliable. I personally use Pure Encapsulations, B Complex Plus, it's called. It's a full spectrum, and
okay.
that's easy to do. And then
Okay.
moving on, we have DHEA sulfate, which is another steroid hormone made from pregnenolone and cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
This is, a little lower than I would like to see it. It's not terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But its job is essentially to it's seen as a youth hormone. It is androgenic, but it's weakly androgenic, and in its job is to sort of balance against cortisol. It's also made by the adrenals, and
Yes.
there is what a lot of people consider the most reliable metric of longevity and the impact of stress on longevity is the cortisol to DHEA ratio. And I calculated it for you. You want it to be less than 9, and you're 0.09.
Whoop, you lost us there.
And so,
Your Wi-Fi went out a little bit, Jonathan. So that cortisol to DHEA ratio, you just calculated it, and what did it come out to?
yeah, you're at 0.09, and that you want to be at or below that number.
Okay.
I'm looking for an outlet to plug into because my battery's
Gotcha.
going to die here in a second. And so that's a function of your cortisol being slightly elevated and
Yeah.
your DHE being a little bit low.
Why do you think that cortisol was elevated? Just from not having eaten in 12 hours? That it's just naturally like, whoop, hey, because usually it's like within 10, probably 8 to 9, 10 hours I'm eating. So as
Well,
opposed to
this
that.
is what, yeah, I mean, this is what I was leading off with. I think you're calorically restricted, and that's why your cortisol is elevated and your DHEA is low.
Okay.
And there's another major stress hormone marker that we tested called glucagon
Mm-hmm.
further down the page, which is high.
Well, wait, we skipped estradiol. Anything word because it shows that it's high there. And so is there
Yeah.
anything
Um,
noteworthy?
yeah. So I wasn't certain, based on your last lab work, why it was high. There were a couple possibilities, but now I'm pretty certain that it is because you're aromatizing your testosterone. So, and we talked about how that could be because you don't have a lot of body fat.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have a lot of aromatase enzyme in your body relative to somebody who's maybe 25, 30% body fat. However, because like this is where it should really land for you. Really land for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you lack carbohydrates or you lack calories, your body's going to upregulate the stress hormones in
Mm-hmm.
order to supply the necessary substrate for your mitochondria. And you have been practicing fasting and for a long time, and that will slow down your metabolism. So if you're burning fat, your metabolism gets slower, and
Mm-hmm.
as a result of that slowing, you feel less hungry. And when you
Mm-hmm.
feel less hungry, you eat less. So you reinforce the caloric restriction as a result. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So this
yeah,
is
I
a
do.
long-term process.
Yeah.
And there's actual data here that's showing your cortisol is elevated, your glucagon is elevated, and your estradiol is elevated. So that cortisol and these stress hormones are taking your testosterone and making estrogen with it. It's aromatizing. And
Yeah.
cortisol directly does that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
And
right.
it's simply about macros and
Yeah.
calories.
Right. It's not all these I mean, it could be some of these estrogenic, phenoestrogens out there, but hey, take care of it just through eating because this is a big factor. Like, if it's creating estrogen because I'm just not getting enough carbs, and and to be honest, let's with the audience or yourself, like I don't go eat rice or I don't go eat grains, right? So I'm staying away from most grains, which are carb heavy. And so, yeah, you can only get so much through fruits and veggies,
The
sweet,
easiest way, the
sweet
easiest way
potatoes.
you
Yeah.
could, yeah, you could do that. But the easiest way to get carbohydrates is by drinking juice.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yep.
I mean, 8 ounces of grape juice is 39 grams of carbohydrate.
Yeah.
It's easy to digest, and you get the added benefit of getting plenty of potassium because
Yeah.
most of the potassium in the food supply is in the fruit.
Yeah.
So, drinking fruit juice, you can easily get above the RDI for
Oh,
potassium.
yes, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, what you can do, if it doesn't cause blood sugar swings,
Mhm.
you would know this based on
Yeah.
feel,
And I haven't,
is
it hasn't.
then sipping it during the day is fine,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
between your meals. But if it does cause blood sugar swings, then just drinking 8 ounces with each meal you eat is going to get the carbohydrates into your system but you have the buffer of the protein and the fat and the fiber that's in
Right.
your meal that's going to buffer the uptake of that glucose. So you won't get the roo roo kind of thing
Mm.
happening.
Yeah. Better to go after a meal. I mean, because you don't want to dilute, have too much, dilute your hydrochloric acid in your stomach with a lot of water, juices in there. So maybe it serves as dessert a half hour after the meal, something like that. I don't know. I'm just trying to think how to hack this. I mean, or it could have it with the meal because yeah, I mean, well, the mirror. Anyway, I get the point, and I'll experiment with that as ways to make sure that the blood sugar isn't. So I'm feeling cognitively sharp.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and
And what Mercola is recommending people do, for people especially who can't eat starches,
mm-hmm.
is to do the dextrose thing. He's saying a half a pound to a pound of dextrose in a liter of water. Is it a liter or a gallon? And you're sipping it throughout the day.
Wow.
And so I'm not recommending that, but this is his method for, the easiest, fastest way to get sugar into your
Sugars
system.
into your system. Yeah. I mean, ideally, if one can afford it, I mean, Costco's mango juice or the pomegranate juice, where you're, helping the acromancia, right? So
Right.
any of these juices are really good. Yeah.
Yeah, my go-tos are orange, grape. I do okay with apple, but some people don't,
Yeah.
and watermelon. And so, I try to do 32 ounces a day, which gets me an additional 120, 130 grams of carbohydrate in the form of simple sugar.
Yeah.
And I take them with my meals. So, because I do have a tendency to like feel the swing
Hmm.
if I like drink 60 ounces of grape juice, like on an empty stomach.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, this is, I think, really where the rubber is going to hit the road. Let me scroll down a little bit.
Okay.
Um, Reverse T3. So we ordered this because we wanted to see how well your liver was doing at converting thyroid T4 into thyroid T3, the active form. And if it's not converting well, reverse T3 will increase. Okay. So
Hmm.
yours is low. That's a good thing. Okay. And when I mean low, I mean kind of in the optimal range. Okay.
Yeah.
That means you're converting well. And I'm going to scroll down because I think there's two other thyroid markers. So if you look at your TSH here, your thyroid, this is the signal, thyroid stimulating hormone is the signal from your pituitary to your thyroid to make thyroid hormone. Okay. And you can see previously 1.2, which is already pretty good, to
Hmm.
below 1.
Hmm.
And so what that means is that if it's decreasing,
Yeah.
your body is getting feedback that it's making enough. So your thyroid status is good, even though you're calorically restricting. So
Mm.
it's like your caloric restriction is low enough to affect testosterone and estrogen, but not low enough to affect your thyroid status. So
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Um,
does.
and so you're not in like a terrible place, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
It's just simply like, if it is at a really basic level, if you went from like 8 to 16 ounces of goat milk and from 16 to maybe 24 or 32 ounces of juice,
Juice.
this whole thing would change. Like all your stress hormone profile would change, your PTS would change, your testosterone would go up, your estrogen would go down, and you would even get that extra bump from taking exogenous pregnenolone. By the way, taking the exogenous pregnenolone does not produce a negative feedback.
Right. Yeah. So there's no risk of needing to, it's not going to reduce my endogenous, my
Correct.
own pregnenolone production. So
Right.
it's fine. Yeah. And this goat milk would, one of the things that we, of course, talk about regularly is sleep and getting that, ideal. So maybe this goat milk at night is a good, you said, 1 cup in the morning, add a cup at night, because that's always good for sleep as
Yeah.
well. Some of those
You
carbs.
could do, you could do that with a little bit of honey in it as
Yeah.
like a
I like
pre-sleep
that.
snack.
Hmm.
It's not too heavy. If you feel like it is heavy when you're trying, like maybe you do it an hour before sleep or something,
Yeah.
but if
Yeah.
you feel like you're laying down and you're getting reflux from it, or you're feeling heavy, or it's negatively affecting your sleep, then adjust the timing.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds great. Well, I'm thrilled that my thyroid is in good shape here, despite some other numbers being off. So
Yeah.
my
So let's look at the stress profile. Okay. So here we have cortisol. It's I like to see this below 10, which you were the first time, and now it's almost 50% higher. And what's interesting is we probably would have seen the same thing, maybe even higher, but you had eaten something like 6 hours before your last lab work,
right.
and that eating would have depressed your cortisol, because that's what carbohydrates do.
Yeah.
Is you put the carbohydrates in and your cortisol will go down. You
Hmm.
pull the carbohydrates out, your cortisol goes up. And so I think we're seeing a true metric right here
Hmm.
of your current status. Your vitamin D went up as a result of summertime, getting more sun. That's pretty
Yeah.
obvious. Um,
And
you know,
today's reading, we used to think that, oh, better to have it in 90, but because of who is it, some of the studies you're now looking at, it's like, oh, closer to 50 is more ideal, because otherwise it's a problem with vitamin A, retinol, right? That we don't want elevated too much vitamin D. Reiterate that subject.
yeah. Well, like from sunlight, I don't think that you can overdo it.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I don't think anybody needs to like restrict sunlight because they're worried about getting too much vitamin D or producing too much vitamin D. This is more around supplementing.
Okay.
And so there is evidence that having a vitamin D level below 50 would trigger parathyroid hormone to be released. So there is a relationship there. There's also a relationship between vitamin A status and the short answer is the jury's out for me, but
Okay.
because there's multiple interactions. And so I'm in sort of a testing process right now on this because mine is 45 at the moment. And I wonder, am I a little low? Would that, if it was 10 points higher, would that affect, I don't have high parathyroid or prolactin, but would it increase my total testosterone if it was 10 points higher?
Yeah.
Um,
Gotcha.
so I mean, that's kind of why I'm saying, I don't know. I don't want to see it below 30.
Hmm.
And if someone was getting a lot of sun and they still couldn't get it above 30, then I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, you could supplement, especially if it's wintertime. But you would do smaller doses of it, and you would do it like a little bit more intermittently.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Okay.
All right. So a GGT is a reflection of it's another liver enzyme that basically tells you about glutathione status, and so it's just gone up for you. That's curious. Ideal is below 17. So there's something that your body's detoxifying using glutathione to detoxify. Um, it's probably a chemical
Hmm.
of some sort.
Hmm.
Um, Anything that glutathione would act on is a detoxification.
Hmm.
So it could be metals, it could be glyphosate, it could be xenoestrogens. It can even get raised by free iron. So it's sort of a general marker, but you've got this a little bit elevated and your other liver enzymes a little bit elevated. And so I'm like, thinking about why that might be. Moving on to glucagon. So glucagon is another stress hormone. And
Mm-hmm.
some people don't think that it is a stress hormone, but it only gets activated in a sort of dietary restriction scenario. So if you're
Mm.
fasting or caloric restricting or intermittent fasting or low carb, glucagon's going to rise. And
Yeah.
it's always present in insulin resistance. And so it is always seen in a stress when the organism is stressed, you always see glucagon increased. And even though it's not listed as, it's not a catecholamine like adrenaline and
Mm-hmm.
noradrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a, it's not cortisol, it's not aldosterone. So, but it's there. And so this is elevated because of your fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, is it elevated because I fasted overnight or because, I mean, because so it would naturally be elevated in the morning because you're fasting for 12 hours?
Yes, but it shouldn't be high. So yours is much higher than it should be.
Right.
And this is another indicator that you're just not, that you're underfed.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
And so for some reason they couldn't, they didn't get lactic acid. That's annoying because you paid for
Yeah.
that, and you also paid for free fatty acids. This
Yeah.
is something that you would see elevated, by the way. Most certainly we would see it elevated because glucagon is elevated. So
Mhm.
glucagon would increase free fatty acids in the blood, but we can't confirm that because we don't
Yeah.
have the result. Your insulin's a little bit raised. I think that's it's still in a good range. So, from an insulin and blood sugar standpoint, you're perfect. Um, and that's the end of our profile there. And so let me show you a couple other things. And this is with regard to the food. And then I think I have got maybe 15 minutes. Uh, I'm just going to do general screen share. Okay. So you 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 told me you gave me your weight 134. I think you said we just called it 8.5% body fat. And so I used the Catch McCardle calculator
Mhm.
over here to figure out what your basal metabolic rate was. Okay, so you're 5'6", 134, body fat percentage 8.5, and oh, I tested me twice. So your BMR is 1,500 calories, 1,571 calories. Okay. And
Okay.
that's you basically just existing,
Right.
you know,
Without meditating all day long.
right. Now, what we need to do then is figure out what your activity level is, and then then we can determine the total amount of calories you need to eat in a day in order to
Mhm.
maintain your weight.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And so we'd probably put, in this moderately active. I'm surprised active is less than moderately active, but yeah, moderately active would be
Okay.
more. Yeah.
So we're going to take 1,571 and we're going to multiply that by 1.78. And that
Mhm.
means that in order to maintain you're at a decent metabolic rate, you should be eating 2,796 calories a day.
Yeah, maybe it's more active. Let's give it a range. Let's go with active to moderately active.
Okay.
1.3. So,
So
yeah.
2,800 would be the high end, and 2,560 would be the low end. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you were trying to add weight,
Yeah.
you would be eating more than 2,800 calories. Like we'll call it 200 to 400 calories more.
Mhm. Mhm. So should be at
And
3,000 plus.
yeah, and I'm going to guess that you're probably around 2,000.
I don't know. Okay, that's why I got it. You're right. This is convincing me. I got to go figure this out. I got, it's tough. I seem like I'm, always, yeah, but it may not be the same calories. Just because the plate's full doesn't mean that it's a lot of calories. So we'll go figure it out.
So so let's split the difference. We'll call it 2,700 calories just
Hmm.
for and and then what we're going to do is we're going to calculate your protein. So at 0.82 per pounds times your lean body mass of 134, you are, let's see here, 110. So 110 grams per day.
Okay.
And then we double that amount in grams for your carbohydrate intake. So that's 220 grams per day of carbohydrates.
Hmm.
And then we'll take your total calories, that we're using is 2,700, and we're going to multiply it by 0.28. Oops, 0.028. And that's 75 grams of fat per day. And so that's your macro profile. Okay.
Okay.
And then do you normally eat 3 meals or 4 meals?
4 to 5. I
Okay.
mean, if you look at the morning coffee, coffee or matcha with MCT oil and goat milk, so that's considered one, at 7 o'clock, then at 10:30, it's fruit, then a more of a real meal, 12, 1 o'clock, then, 4 or 5 o'clock. So yeah, it's probably more like 5 meals a day.
Okay. I'm just going to do, I'm going to pretend that you're eating 4 solid meals
Okay.
just to give you an idea of what to do here.
Hmm.
So I'm just taking these macro numbers and dividing them by 4. So a standard meal, if you ate 4 solid meals a day,
Hmm.
separated by like 3 to 4 hours each,
Yep.
would consist of 27.5 grams of protein, 55 grams of carbohydrate, and 18.75 grams of fat. And
Mhm.
if you did that 4 times rhythmically throughout the day,
Mhm.
then you would meet this this calorie load of 2,700,
Mhm.
and you would get a good distribution of carbs to fat.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. Yep, okay, and 55 and 18.5. Okay. Yeah.
And so, uh, there's like one other area of recommendation, and that's like supplements, right? If you wanted to add those in while you were doing all this,
Mhm.
or you could just add it in after you have solidified your diet for 2 weeks. Okay.
Mhm.
One we talked about is pregnenolone.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Another one, if you're not doing it already, is taking vitamin E.
Mm.
This is directly anti-estrogenic.
Okay.
And then we talked about, so, I've got these notes here, but we already talked about calcium. So you talked about already increasing
Yeah.
your calcium from the goat milk. And then the third thing that you might consider, this is really, I would do this like maybe what you want to do is go get a DEXA scan,
Mm. Yeah. It's been a
and
while.
and you
Yep.
can get your bone mineral density from that.
Mhm.
And because your parathyroid is high,
Mhm.
uh, it may affect it has been high presumably for a long period of time. It
Mhm.
could lower your bone mineral density.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
so you're doing the right thing by adding the goat milk and I think doubling it. But this is where I'm saying you might want to also add vitamin K2.
Oh,
Okay.
despite all the liver, just because K2 is in the liver, so I was thinking we were taken care of there, and I do have K2 liposomal, and supplement form, so I can add it anyway if you think that's like, oh, you can never get enough even if you are taking liver. So,
Yeah, well, I would say under normal circumstances that will be enough. But
mhm,
if you've had chronically elevated PTH, then
yeah,
you'll have chronically depleted bones. And
okay,
so um, so that would mean that you would need to take kind of a super physiological dose of
great.
this stuff. But if you don't want to just add it in, you could
Hmm.
use a DEXA scan to verify that, you know. And
Yeah,
if and like maybe your bone mineral testing comes back and it's fine. And so
yeah,
then I would say don't worry about it. The only other context that you might want to do, higher dose MK4 K2 would be, you do a CAC, a coronary artery calcium score, and you
hmm,
see a lot of calcium in your arterial plaque. You can
mm,
use K2 to pull it out and put it back in
mm,
your bones.
mm,
Another circumstance is if you have like, pretty severe gut dysfunction or, um, intestinal permeability, it can help repair the mucosal lining. But it doesn't sound like you have either of those other two, so it's kind of at your own discretion.
yeah. I'll muscle test it. That's a quick way to, whether that K2 is worth. I probably can't hurt to have it. So, more than likely, especially since, hey, if the possibility of growing back some enamel on the teeth and making sure your teeth are healthy, right? Which I've had problems with, way back probably was 15 years ago. I did do a DEXA scan. It was definitely osteopenia. So I was in that category of bone loss. Of course, hadn't drunk milk for all my life. So very calcium deficient for the majority of my life because of my allergy to milk and milk products. So, and cheeses. So, but this is a good way to get back into it and to find out where it's at. So I might not do the Dexicam just yet. I might wait, 6 months, and get on this curriculum, this plan here, and then see where it is. So this is all good. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I hope it's useful.
Very. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, definitely I mean, it's not daunting, right? So I mean, a lot of people have daunting things here, like really hard to deal with stuff that's so no, I feel good about it because it's fairly easy. And of course this gives me incentive to go do my chronometer so I can see where I really am with
Yeah,
regard to those calories. And you
and
might
I
be,
think it's only necessary maybe once a quarter to do 1 or 2 days.
yeah.
Because really you're just trying to get a baseline. And then once you get your baseline, you want to use it to help yourself actually meet your macronutrient requirements. But
Mhm.
once you've got that rhythm, then you don't need to use it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean,
maybe
and
you then,
with the positive, if this is all working correctly, and we're into an ideal calorie non-restriction, then we should see some body fat go on, weight gain go up, testosterone go up, maybe sleep improve, neurocognitive abilities get even better, right? So these are all aspects that I value, and want to see improved. So, it's good that, hey, just because I have low body fat, that's not necessarily a good thing. It might look okay, but it's not an anti-aging thing, which is what I value. So great. Let's see what happens here over the course of 4 months.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
All right.
Um, any other questions or Ben, you got any questions before I head out?
I don't know, Ben, you got anything? Christine, anything? Yeah.
Yeah, Christina.
Maybe no, I'll kind of rewatch some of this, and if anything feels unanswered, it's a good place to start for some more content.
Yeah, it's good, right? We'll come back for more content after some. Yeah, it's good to put out in snippets. All right.
Cool.
Beautiful, Jonathan.
I'll see you tonight.
See
Does
you
Mark
tonight.
pass the test?
No, because I didn't do my chronometer. I'm a loser.
Yeah, I know. I get it. There's most people have I had it too, a lot of inertia to getting in the chronometer and like start filling that stuff out.
Yeah, it's the details that you have to have the right incentive, given all that's going on. But it's okay. 2 days, I can stomach it. Someone else does it around here, so why not? Beautiful. Okay, I know
Yeah.
you've got your next thing. We do too. So we'll see you tonight, brother.
Cool. See you tonight.
Yep. Ciao.